All right, welcome back everyone. I think we're ready to get going again. Our second presentation this evening is from the outdoor education team at Bruce Peninsula National Parks, Madeline Zanigan, Sean Skinkle, and Zach Root. You've seen Zach moderating our Q&A sessions and taking care of tech support over the past 2 evenings, and behind the scenes, Maddie and Sean have been hugely helpful in bringing this event together. Welcome to all three of you.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you to the friends as well for putting this together and for inviting us to join you tonight. My name is Maddie. I'm one of the interpretation coordinators for Bruce Peninsula National Park and Fathom 5 National Marine Park. Although normally I would be probably taking some of you out onto a trail to be looking at some orchids or other spectacular things in the park. Obviously that wasn't possible this year. So we thought we would try and bring the park to you a little bit. And we did make like a virtual hike video. So I will play that for you in just a moment here. But afterwards, I will pass it on to Sean and he'll be taking you through how you can become a citizen scientist and get to using iNaturalist. So that'll be fun too. So I can get the video started here. Hold on. Let's see. All right, are we seeing this okay? Oops.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Hello, bonjour, Ani. My name is Sean Skinkle, and I'm joined by my friends on the outdoor education team at Bruce Peninsula National Park and the shores of Fathom 5 National Marine Park. We'd like you to join us on a virtual journey to discover this special place. These lands and waters are on the traditional territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, comprised of 2 communities, Saugeen First Nation and Chippewas of Nawash, who've been stewards of this land since time immemorial. The Saugeen Peninsula is home to an incredible diversity of unique habitats, and the plants and animals who live here are very special. It's for this reason we have the 2nd largest number of orchid species in all of North America. Forging their way in the harshest of habitats, orchids employ unsuspecting pollinators to do their bidding. They've evolved to thrive in places that normally plants would struggle by manipulating the fungus and the soil, as well as insects around them, to compensate for the lack of resources where they grow. Let's go on a walk. We'll discover these incredible flowers and uncover how they use adaptive traits to become pollinated without spending energy on rewards.
Named for its appearance like charging ram, with leaflets next to the flower hanging down like little curved horns, the ram's head is our smallest of our slipper orchids and considered to be one of the rarest in all of North America. Pollinators are drawn to the colorful flower arrangements of burgundy and white in the shape of goatee, but they're also attracted to the light sweet smell that produced by the lateral petals and the sepals and the labellum of the plant. Megachile bees, also known as leafcutter bees, translates to big lips for collecting the nesting materials that they use. Included in this group are also the resin bees and the mortar bees, also known as mason bees, which are solitary and don't live in colonies. Their sting is not as painful as honeybees or bumblebees, will only sting if they're actually threatened. But mason bees are the most effective pollinators. Wow, up to 120 times more efficient than honeybees and bumblebees. They're bluish in color and use mud and masonry products to build their nest. Where would we be without them?
The grass pink orchid is an exquisite pink magenta orchid, and it can be found in wetlands, in fens and ditches, often accompanied by the rose begonia and pitcher plants. The grass pink orchid is pollinated by a variety of bees, especially bumblebees. This orchid deploys a very clever combination of visual enticement and aerobatics to achieve pollination. This dainty but deceitful flower tricks its pollinator by employing an ingenious lip structure and back flips the unsuspecting insect. Since the main pollinator of the grass pink is the beloved bumblebee, it's fair to say she rather unceremoniously is bounced onto her butt and back. There are small bristles of hairs that resemble stamens and pistils that any self-respecting pollinator would expect to find nectar and pollen. These tiny bristles, supported below by the base and by the column, this in fact provides the orchid a joint that bends forward. The deceived bumblebee lands on the bristles and is dumped onto her back and bum on the column below. This has the desired result for the orchid. Pollination in the wild is achieved, and the beloved bumblebee continues on to the next flower. Bumblebees are large, hairy insects with a lazy buzz and a clumsy flight. Many of them are yellow and black, and along with lady slippers, dragonflies, and butterflies, are some of the only insects that people are happy to have. It is often thought that hummingbirds have the highest metabolic rate of animals, but if the truth be told, the bumblebee is 75% higher than the hummingbird. Bumblebees have learned how to take nectars from flowers. In some flowers this is easy, but in other flowers it's hard, and it's hard to learn how to get them. Because it takes the bumblebee so long to figure out how to get the nectar, she often just visits one kind of flower until the source of nectar is gone. It takes time and energy to learn how to get nectar from complicated flowers. However, the rewards are great for the bee and for the flower. Because of the effort, she will visit the same flower again and again. Bumblebees can often scent mark the flowers where they have been and visited. This scent secreted from the gland in the bumblebee's tarsus. Scent marking reduces the time spent probing different flowers, and that brings us back to the grass pink orchid. It's engineered to deceive, and the intricate combination of enticing the traps to prevail and exist.
One orchid that may be familiar to many of us can be found nearly anywhere on the peninsula. Lady slippers are often found in ditches, beside trails, and even in your driveway. The signature slipper shape and the bright colors lure unsuspecting bees into the chamber. Once the bee is inside, it realizes, 1, that there's no nectar reward, and 2, that it cannot go back out the way that it came in. The bee must navigate through the back of the flower, then up a narrow passage where the orchid keeps its pollen in wait. The bee has to squeeze through, picking up pollen on its body as it escapes. For some bees, it takes a few tries to realize that these flowers have nothing to give. In that time, though, they have already cross-pollinated several individuals. This con artist's work pays off. Some showy lady slippers have been found to live up to 50 years. The native species of bees that fall prey to the orchid's tricks include leafcutter bees and other medium-sized bees like little carpenter and mason bees. Leafcutters are charming and harmless insects that cut out pieces of leaves to craft little nursery chambers for their young. These bees are so good at pollinating that they're even used by farmers commercially to ensure that important crops like onions, carrots, and peas are productive. The next time you have shepherd's pie, you can thank a leafcutter bee.
The striped coral root gets its name from the rhizome structures underground that resemble corals that you might see in the ocean. Like some of our orchids, they're saprophytes, meaning they get their required nutrients from fungi that utilize decomposing organic matter. The plant does not possess leaves, and since it does not photosynthesize, instead it relies on fungal neighbors to provide food. The plant is named for the beautiful burgundy and yellow stripes of the stem and flower, and is one of the more common orchids on the Saugeen Peninsula. It attracts a parasitic wasp to do its pollinating. Pimpla pedalis is attracted to perhaps a light sweet odor as well as its bright flower structure, and also draws in other insects for the wasp to prey upon. Parasitic wasps are predatory, and they lay their eggs in another insect host. Many of these insects, such as caterpillars and aphids, can be very harmful to a variety of plant species. So the next time you think about swatting a wasp, give it a little bit, or maybe a lot, of extra space and let it go on its way. This way it can perform its useful function.
These impressively tall orchids are not usually found in eastern North America, but there is a population in the Great Lakes region, including one on the Saugeen Bruce Peninsula. The flowers of the Alaskan rain orchid are fragrant in the evenings with a musky, soapy, and honey-like scent. The varieties in scent may be based on the life cycle of the orchid and the stage it's in. Due to being fragrant in the evenings, the pollinator is a night flyer. The pug moth is drawn to the orchid's scent and pale color. The moths will carry the pollen on their tongues as they attempt to feed on the orchid. Moths tend to visit the same range of plants that daytime pollinators like butterflies and bees visit, but there's one key difference between them. There are far more moths flying around than butterflies and bees combined. Although more research is needed, some scientists believe that moths may actually be the heavy lifters in the pollination world.
Even though these highly evolved flowers are capable of thriving in what we would think of as harsh environments, they're still extremely sensitive. It's important that they be protected and respected for their rarity. Your national parks help to provide a safe haven for these marvels of nature. When you visit or encounter an orchid elsewhere, please make sure to stay on designated trails so that you don't disturb the delicate fungus underfoot that these orchids rely on. The pollinators we discussed today are just a small portion of the bigger picture. Pollinators ensure the sustained future of our natural environment and the food on your plate. The greatest threat to these pollinators is habitat loss, largely due to urban and agricultural development and climate change. Pesticide use also accounts for the loss of many pollinators since they contaminate plants with toxins that pollinators absorb when moving from flower to flower. To help out our pollinators and ensure that they keep doing their job, there are a few things you can do. First, you can plant native species of plants in your backyard. It's important to make sure that the plants you put in your garden are edible to the native species of insect where you live, as they can often only eat the plants they are used to rather than non-native plants from elsewhere. This will ensure that there's lots of food for many of the larvae or babies of the insects to grow into strong adults who go on to pollinate many of our wild plants and crops. Secondly, remember to be curious. If you see an orchid, an insect, or anything else that captures your attention in nature, try to learn something about it. Becoming more familiar with the natural world around you will make your experience of our wild places that much better. You can use the internet, a field guide, or even an app like iNaturalist to help you get started. Well, we've come to the end of our hike today, and I'm so glad that you could join us. Remember, if you're visiting the park or anywhere else in nature, tread lightly, look closely, because you never know what you might find. All right. So I hope that came through okay. I will be passing it off to Sean now, who's going to be helping explain how we can all become citizen scientists with iNaturalist.
Hello, bonjour. Can everyone see me?
Yep, we're good.
Okay. Hello, bonjour, Ani. My name is Sean Skinkle, and we also have Zachary Root here. We are outdoor educators at Bruce Peninsula National Park. Hopefully you enjoyed the virtual guided hike. We had a lot of fun making it. Hopefully you're feeling inspired to get out into nature and discover even more. To help you on your journey, Zach and I want to share with you a tool we use frequently at Parks Canada called iNaturalist. This is an app that can help you to learn to identify new species, take notes, explore what has been spotted near you, and also contribute to an impressive amount of citizen science data. There's a community on iNaturalist of over 4 million users, and there is an incredible amount of data. There's been 73,232,000 and 418 observations of living organisms. So the best part about this is that you no longer have to be this particular type of naturalist to explore the natural world around you. All you need is your phone. And let's be real, this is the lens that most people experience the world now. iNaturalist bridges the connection between technology and nature and uses that to the advantage of conservation. Now, without a doubt, field books and notebooks still play a very important role, but even for those nature lovers with several books, you might spot on one hike this wacky wildflower and then an interesting insect, a beautiful bird, a mysterious mushroom, and maybe a funny furry mammal. And that's a lot of literature to carry with you. I've thrown some photos up on the screen of some photos that I have taken and on hikes. And if you recognize any of the species, I encourage you just for fun to put them in the chat. Now, maybe you're more of a casual nature observer, so you're more likely to be in your backyard or campground in the sun and wanting to ID the bug that just landed in your drink. Sure, you're not this ready, like the naturalist pictured there, but you have a phone with you, and that means that you have the iNaturalist app. I love that this app makes observing and documenting the natural world around you accessible to everybody. So what iNaturalist will allow you to do is take a photo of any living organism, and it will help you to identify it. But iNaturalist is more than an ID app like the sister app Seek. It's built to help you contribute to citizen science, although Seek does have really fun badges. In iNaturalist, you can make a guess, and then more knowledgeable community members can join the conversation and make suggestions. When enough users agree, it becomes verified, and voila, your contribution becomes research grade. So maybe you'll help identify an invasive species like an emerald ash borer in your neighborhood, rare to find species like the rusty patched bumblebee in your garden. Most definitely, you will become more knowledgeable about the natural world around you by using it, and hopefully more inspired to be a steward of it. Be careful though, because you might become the friend who everyone sends random photos of living organisms and asks, what the heck is this? I have become that person for a few of my friends personally. Anyways, now that I've gotten you excited to use the iNaturalist program, I am going to pass the conversation over to Zach, and he is going to show you the technical how-to of using iNaturalist. I do want to say that if you're already a user, you might just want to stick around because you'll likely learn a trick or two. I learned several things just from doing a bit of more research into what iNaturalist is capable of. So Zach, how do we get started with iNaturalist?
Yeah, so just like that great introduction said, basically what iNaturalist is, it's a great way to keep track of all the different observations you find when you're hiking. It's a good way to help ID what you find and increase your knowledge of the things around you. And it helps you become a citizen scientist. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through like step by step from downloading the app to making your first observation, and then another feature of the app and some useful tips. So just to start at the very beginning, whether or not you're on an Apple or an Android, you're going to have to download the app. So since I'm on an Android, it'll look something like this. To find a naturalist, I assume most of you know, you just go to the search bar. You could search up by naturalist, and you look for this big logo of a green bird, and it should be the first thing that comes up. So all you have to do is click on it, press install, wait a minute for the app to download, install on your phone, and then you're good to open it. And this should be the screen that you open up on. It's where you'll sign up if you don't have an account or log in if you already have one. And I assume most of you have done this for a million things at this point, so I think you can cover that yourself. And once that step is done, when you open the app for the first time, it should probably bring you to this page, the My Observations page. It'll be empty because you haven't observed anything yet, but as time goes on, this will fill up and fill up. But before we start to actually get into observations, we're going to start by looking at a few of the other features on the app. So we'll start by going and clicking that little logo on the top left, and it'll bring up a side menu where there's a few different options you can go to. So there's the Explore function, which allows you to see observations of everyone else using the map globally, all those 70 some million observations that Sean said. There's this guide section, which is again made by the users for different locations or groups of animals or plants, that allows you to kind of see and expect when you're going to new places. But the one I want to start off before we start making observations is the project tab. So if you click on that, it'll be empty at the start because you haven't joined anything. The reason why I'm showing you this now is because the national park actually has its own project that you and anyone else can join. So if you want to join, I think the easiest way to do that is just using the search symbol at the top and then searching up Bruce Peninsula Fathom 5 NP for the national park. You can probably just search up Bruce Peninsula and it'll be one of the first ones. Just look for the Parks Canada logo. So all you have to do is, once you get there, is click on that and you'll be brought over to this page. And as you can see, there's over 11,000 observations and 2,600 species that have been observed just in the national park alone by, as you can see, only the 59 people that have joined this organization. So imagine what it'd be like if more and more people would start to use this app as they're just exploring around the park. And once you're here, it's really easy to join. All you have to do is press that little join button and you're good to go. And I'll show you how to add your observation to this once we actually start going to our observations. We're going to go back to this previous page, again to the side menu, and click on your name to get back to your observation page. It looks a little bit different this time because I brought it up on my account. So this is what it'll look like once you have a few observations underneath your belt. To get started on an actual observation is you just click this little plus symbol at the bottom right, and it'll bring up this menu here. And there's 5 different options, and I'll quickly talk through each one so you know which one to choose when you're on the app. So the first one is no media. That means you didn't take a photo or a video or a sound recording, but you still want to record the fact that you saw something so you can kind of keep track of it. So that's when you'd use that. The next 2 options are both in regards to photos. So there's take photo, which is you'd use if when you click on it, your camera will come up and you could take a live photo of whatever you see in front of you, and then choose image will bring up your gallery and you could choose from photos that you've already taken. I more often use choose image, so I can take like a whole bunch of photos and then just choose the best ones to put on iNaturalist. And then lastly, there's the 2 sound recording ones where it's similar to photos, where there's one where you can record live or choose a sound. I personally haven't used this function, but I think it'd be good if you want to make observations of, let's say, songbirds, because they're often hard to take photos of with your phone because they'll fly away before you can get close. So using their calls is another way to keep track of your observations. And for the example I want to go through right now, I'm just going to use the choose image. When I click on that, it'll bring up a gallery. Unfortunately, I don't have any recent photos of orchids to take you through the example, but I did see a snapping turtle the other day, so this is what I'm going to use. And out of all these photos, I think this is a good one to use for iNaturalist because it fills up most of the frame. It's pretty clear what it is and it's distinct from the background. So that's the one I'm going to use for making this observation. So once I click on that photo, this is what it will look like. Now your observation is started. As you can see at the very top, their photo is first. And if you want, for example, if you're using an orchid or another species that's a little bit harder to identify, you can use this symbol at the top to add more photos so that it's easier to help try and identify which species you have. And once you have your photos, the first thing you want to do is try and figure out which species it is. So you just click on this symbol and it'll load for a second and it'll use photo recognition on your image that you put in, and it'll try and guess the species that you have. And as you can see, this is a snapping turtle, and the app did a great job at choosing exactly what it is. So it has the common snapping turtle. And then all you have to do is click on that, and it'll bring you to this page, and you can read about snapping turtles all you want. And since it says the right one, I would just click select, and then our ID would be good. But this is, of course, like the best case scenario. It only gave me one recommendation and it was the right one, so there's not an issue. But let's say I use like a different photo. Going back a screen, let's say I use this photo. It's the same turtle, except there's way more beach. It's not filling up the frame. So it's suggesting that maybe it's a sea turtle or a marine iguana, and it's obviously not that. So in this case, since I know it's a snapping turtle, I would use this species search bar here, and I'd search up snapping turtle. Then all I'd have to do is find the common snapping turtle, which is one that it is. Click on it, and we're at the same screen that we were before, and we can click select. But let's say there's another situation where I didn't know it was a common snap, just search up turtle, and I would use the turtles and tortoises section here, and then select that as my ID. It's completely fine to do. If you have no idea what the species is, if you can guess at a random group, go ahead and do that. And this works for any sort of group. Let's say you're out on a hike and you think you see an orchid, but you don't know what the species is. If you want to put it on iNaturalist, just search up orchid, you choose the orchid family, and you could just leave this as your ID. And as long as you take some good photos, hopefully other people in the community can help you identify your species. But since I know that it's a snapping turtle, that's what I'm going to leave for the ID. And as you can see, that's the one that it has there. And it is worth noting, if you have zero idea what your species is whatsoever, you can leave that blank, or you can come up with a little description for it. For example, if I somehow didn't even know what a turtle was, I could put swimming animal with a hard shell, and then that'd be perfectly fine, and other people can help identify it. And that should be like the longest part of putting in an observation into iNaturalist. And it's also the fun part, just trying to figure out which species it is. So I'm going to go through the rest of these, and they're pretty quick to go through. It's just clicking through and just tapping stuff. So first, there's a note section. This is completely optional. You could put in anything you think is interesting. You could put in stuff about the habitat, what the organism was doing, the size of it, anything you think is interesting or helpful, but you don't need to put anything in there if you don't want. Next, there's the date, time, and location. Most of this should automatically be put in by your phone using the information from the picture, but if that doesn't happen, you can pretty easily put that in manually. Next is a pretty important step called location visibility. This should especially be used when you're trying to put in observations for rare species or often poached species. So you want to use this for most orchids that you find. So you click on this, and what this does is it changes the visibility of the location, as it says in the name, for the observation that you're putting in. So open observation means that anyone can see the exact location that you put in. Obscured means that it'll still show up on the map, but it'll just put like a random point somewhere else, so people can't go and try and find exactly where that observation is. And then lastly, private is no one else other than you can see the location. But since it's a snapping turtle on like Sauble Beach and it's long gone by now, I couldn't find it if I wanted to. I'm just going to leave it as open. Then there's the captive and cultivated part, which is just asking whether or not the animal that, or the organism that you have is wild. So whether it's like a plant someone put in their garden, in that situation, you would check this. But if it's a wild animal like the turtle here, we would just leave that unchecked and we're good to go. Now, the last step that you can do is adding to projects. So for example, if the snapping turtle was in the national park, I would click on that and it'll bring up all the different projects that you're part of, and you'd click on whichever one you want to add to. So I'd want to add it to the Bruce Peninsula Fathom 5 project. And then you just need to fill in this information here. So count how many individuals, there's one turtle, so put that as 1. Whether or not it's alive or dead, it was a live turtle, so leave it as that. A brief description of whatever you want. I'd probably just put turtle swimming down the beach. And then lastly, the general habitat, and it just comes up with a bunch of options. And I'd probably put that as open water because it was just swimming around most of the time that I was following it around for, I don't know, probably too long. And then once you've done that, you're done. You could click the arrow at the top and now it's added to the project. And that's all you have to do for adding in an observation. Just click the check mark at the bottom and it'll upload it with all of your other observations. You just give it a second to load and you can click on it, and now your observation is open to the public. Anyone else can see it. And But one thing it's worth noting, if I scroll down a little bit on this page, you'll see that my observation is currently casual grade. So there's casual grade and research grade. Research grade is what you'd want if you want it to be used in citizen science. So even though I have all this stuff in here that I just put in, it's still not research grade because that takes the confirmation of the ID from other people. So I can show you what that looks like using a previous observation. So this one here is an observation I put in of a Massasauga rattlesnake. Just like the snapping turtle, it started with just casual grade, but after a bit of time, more people confirmed my ID and it became research grade. So if you click this one here, that's the activity page, and it shows all the other people that ID'd it. So there's mine at the top, and then 2 other people confirmed it was a Massasauga rattlesnake. So with the help of these 2 people, we all agreed that it's the Massasauga rattlesnake, and that's what made it research grade. But even then, like, I didn't really tell you what research grade was, so I'm going to show you what this is now. There's another website called gbif.org, or Global Biodiversity Information Facility. And this is a website that promotes and has access to tons of data on all sorts of animals and plants and all different types of organisms that are free for anyone to use. So as you can see on this website, there's almost 2 billion observations and 61,000 data sets. And the iNaturalist is just one of those many data sets. And to find it, all you'd have to do is search up iNaturalist in the search bar. It'll bring up a search engine. And the second one there, iNaturalist research grade observations, you can click on that, and then it'll bring you to this page where you can download the data and use it in whatever you want, whether that's research or just out of interest. You do whatever you want with it. And so there's 30 million observations in just this single data set. Data at the bottom, you see there's been over 500,000 downloads and 1,386 citations just relating to this data set. So just in 2020, there were 500 citations in scientific papers that mentioned or used this data. And even though we're a few months out of 2021 ending, there's still over 350 papers that have cited this data set. So if you continue to use iNaturalist and put your observations out there, seems like it's becoming more and more likely that your data could be used in a biodiversity like research project. Now, just to go back to iNaturalist itself, I'm going to show you one more part of the app, and that's the Explorer page. This is how you get to it on the app, and I'm going to show you on the desktop on my computer, just because I think it's a little bit more fun to use Explore on the computer because I could just see more at once. So this is what it looks like on the desktop. There's the Explore page, and this shows all of the different observations that everyone has put on there. So as you can see, there's over 73 million observations and 340,000 species. And I don't know, that's too many for me to try and go through at once. So I don't think that's what I'd want to do. But since it's the Orchid Festival, I'm going to show you what it'd be like if we wanted to look at just the orchids on the Northern Bruce Peninsula. So you would just put in the species that you want. I would just search up orchid, and I put in the family orchids. It'll just show all the species that are in the orchid family. And as you can see, that's still like tons of species. There's nearly 500,000 observations of orchids worldwide. So we want to cut that down a little bit further and bring it to the Northern Bruce Peninsula using the second search bar. You just click on that, and then as you can see, this is just the observations of orchids on the Northern Bruce Peninsula. And there's 1,100 observations and 34 species. And we can actually get even more specific with our search by using this filter section on the top right. And there's tons of options there, but the one I want to show you is this month selection here. And I'm going to quickly walk through each of the different months of the year to show you how the amount of observations that people put on iNaturalist change from month to month. So if you start with January, there's nothing. It's the middle of winter. No one's observing orchids. They're not out yet. And it's the same with February. And then I guess one year was really nice in March, and someone found a Western rattlesnake plantain, and they were able to put an observation for that. And then in April, there were a few more, still the rattlesnake plantain. Then all of a sudden in May, when it starts to get nice, way more observations showed up, and there's 91 observations and 10 different species just throughout the month of May. So there's lady slippers, ram's head lady slippers, again, the rattlesnake plantain, and then the biggest month of the year, at least on iNaturalist, is June, with 582 observations and 28 different species just in a single month. And I bet in previous years, there's a lot of other people that were at the Orchid Festival who put in these observations. So maybe after this, you can go out and try and find some, and you could be one of those people that put in these observations. And then it starts to dwindle off a little bit in June with 239 observations, but there's still 25 different types of species. And since June is the biggest month, it just starts to go down and down from there. So 120 observations and 16 species in August. In September, 64 observations and 9 species. October, 24 observations and 7 species. And then November and December, there were no species observed because, again, it's just winter. And it's worth noting that even though there's like all those different species numbers, there's like, it seemed like there was less species, but because of the flowering patterns of different orchids, it very well was probably different species of orchids throughout all the different months. And I just showed you the grid list, but you can also look at all these observations on a map. So this is all the observations in Northern Bruce Peninsula throughout the entire year, through all the observations that were put on there. And as you can see, there's 2 different types of points on there. There's the pointy ones, which are showing the exact observations, but all the little circles show all the data points that were obscured. I mean, it'd be shown specifically, which is why there's so many right in the middle of the lake. I'm pretty sure no one was finding, I don't know, a yellow lady slipper like 100 kilometers out in the middle of Lake Huron. So that's what those are. So that's showing that a lot of people are really good at making sure that they obscure their data so no one can come and try and find or poach any of the orchids. And now that I've talked so much about how to use iNaturalist, showed you a little bit around the app, I'm going to quickly go through a few tips while taking photos. Of course, we just had so many tips on taking photos from Peter. So this is just specifically for iNaturalist, what might help you be able to identify these species. So this one is a photo of a damselfly. It's not a very good photo to use because it's out of focus if you were able to look closely at it, but you can't because it's too small in the frame. So what you'd want would be a little bit closer. You can actually see the damselfly. It's kind of distinguished from the outside and it's in focus, and luckily it's a pretty distinct species. So this would be a good photo to use in iNaturalist because people could actually identify it. Another tip is to try and take more photos and get different angles of the same individual you're looking at. For example, this is a big moth that I found. So depending on how difficult it is to identify, sometimes you need the antenna, like how you can see in the top right photo, or just the entire back down view or photo of the head. So all that can help other people try and identify your species or your observation once you put it on iNaturalist. So more photos, the better. And then you can use your hand or paper to frame an organism. So it's easier to see it's in focus, which is especially helpful when you're using a phone and what you're trying to take a photo of is really small. But I just want to reiterate, like how we've done so many times throughout the last few days. Don't do this for like orchids where you have to get too close to them. You want to stay like 1 to 2 meters away at least from the orchids because that could kill or hurt them. And don't put your hands on any species that are like pretty sensitive because you don't want to hurt the plants. Just for species like, I don't know, like this big beetle who probably doesn't really care that it's in my hand right now. So it's useful to use that to distinguish it from the environment, but make sure to be picky on which subjects you do that to. And then lastly is to make multiple observations. So let's say I wanted to make an observation for both this rattlesnake and this plant on the right side of the screen. Make 2 different observations in iNaturalist. Make one specifically for the rattlesnake and one specifically for the plant, because iNaturalist can't do both at once. So even if they're in the same photo, just split it into 2 observations. It'll make it easier. And then there you go. Now you have even one more number to have on your observation list to get that way up there. And just to end off on, if you only want ID help and you don't really care too much about keeping track of everything that you're going to see, and citizen science is like, I just want to know what I'm looking at. You could use the Seek app. It was made by iNaturalist. It's good for all ages. You don't need to sign up or have an account. You don't need to do all those fancy steps. It has challenges and badges. It's just a fun way to try and identify species and maybe learn a little bit more when you're out and about on hiking or in your backyard. And that's all I have for my part. So I'll pass it back to Sean for a second to end the presentation.
Thank you so much, Zach. And for everyone in the audience tonight, hopefully you know a little bit more about iNaturalist application than when you started, and more importantly, that you're feeling excited to be a contributing member to citizen science. It is really fun to look at that leaderboard and see where you sit amongst other people you know in terms of your observations, and see where they've been and what they've been seeing. iNaturalist, all levels of expertise are welcome. So if you are an expert and you want to get on there and help to confirm observations, that's fantastic. We need lots of people like that. And if you're one of the folks that are out there taking a lot of pictures anyway, but you don't know what you're seeing, upload them and let others help to identify them. If you're looking for a place with the diversity of ecosystems and living organisms, national parks are the perfect place to explore. Remember that this is the home of many living things, and so please use leave no trace practices during your visit like we've been talking about. And also highly recommend, as Zach had mentioned, obscuring the data for species at risk and poached species like orchids, or in the fall, orchids in the spring, in the fall, edible mushrooms. Before you drive up to the park, I also want to note, make sure you plan ahead, make sure you have a reservation booked, and make use of those shoulder seasons, because from now until September long weekend and even a bit after, very, very busy time. Thinking with our park, with the high amount of visitation, the number of scientists in the field, and it's likely less than you think, in our national park versus the number of visitors carrying phones and taking pictures. Even if half of the visitors could join our project within the app and make just one observation during their visit, it would be an immense contribution of data. So we do really want to encourage it, make use of all the people visiting our park. If you're a cottager or a community member who lives near a national park, this is a great hobby that really does contribute to science and to conservation. For the visitor too, it not only helps the park, but iNaturalist can help to fuel your curiosity and get you a starting point where you can learn more about what you've observed. It can also help to explore what wildlife other folks have seen in an area that you're going to visit. And you just never know what you might be able to identify. It could allow, you could identify something new, and it also could allow us at the park to understand trends. Like Zach had gone through orchid blooming times. We could see if due to whatever factors we might be able to identify, maybe it's climate change, the orchid blooming times might change. It helps us to spot invasive species like wild parsnip, and so that we can actively manage those. Or maybe you're going to discover a new patch of lakeside daisies for us, like Peter had shown photos of. So hopefully, you know, you'll be able to get out there and start using iNaturalist. And if you have any questions, please let us know. Thanks for everyone for your time and your passion. And yeah, bring on the Q&A. If anyone has any questions or even just wants to share anything with us, we're happy to hear it. Zach, let us know if you do get any incoming questions.
Yeah, so let's see, and just a quick one here that I see at the bottom. Is Seek on the App Store? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I haven't checked, but I'm fairly certain that Seek would be on the App Store.
Yes, it is.
I think that's a pretty easy to check. Okay, so yeah, it is. Let's see, so for Kathleen is asking, what can you suggest for those of us who have no iPhone? Do you just mean phone in general? Because this can be used on, like, I have an Android phone or an iPhone. You can use it on like an iPad. I think you can also, I'm not quite sure, so someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure you can also make the observations just on the online, like the website. So you could use that you just wouldn't be able to do it in the field, but if you take photos and you can add them in afterwards just using the website, I think.
Yes, you can, Zach. So if you're out there and you came to this presentation tonight because you really wanted to listen to Peter because you got a new camera and you're out there taking photographs, when you come back and upload those photographs, you can then go on to iNaturalist and upload them that way too.
Okay, so does iNaturalist provide some guidance and or code of conduct in taking photos in order to protect the subject being photographed? So I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Do you mean like how they suggest to take photos in order to make sure we don't damage the individual, like let's say the plant that we're taking photos of? Yeah.
I'm not sure about code of conduct, but I do know that they have some automatic filters for if you log a sighting that's an endangered species or one that's at risk of poaching, that sighting will automatically be obscured, even if you select open or public. They have measures in place to make sure that it's not posted.
And I'm not sure whether the question might be talking about the photos themselves, but when you do upload a photo, if you've selected private, it just stays private to you. But if you have selected that it goes to the public, iNaturalist is an open source software and your photo will be open to the public.
So you can see it, but I think there is also an option to turn off like people being able to use it. Like I think when you put it on there, it automatically becomes like Creative Commons, like anyone can use it. But I think you can take that back so that people still need to get permission in order to use your photos.
Very interesting to know. I hadn't seen that setting. Thanks, Zach.
So I think I answered this one. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure, yeah, it can be done at a computer at home.
For those who have downloaded or who want to use the Seek app, just so you know, I don't know if you'll be able to see it on this phone. No, you can't. It's too bright. But from Seek, you can upload to iNaturalist. So they are connected and made by the same people.
This one is just saying Peter Raspberry noted that there was damage to an orchid field. And yeah, that's like an example of what not to do. So that'd be a situation where you wouldn't want to get up close to it. Maybe you wouldn't even want to make an observation on iNaturalist just because you can't get a good photo and you don't want to tell people where exactly that patch would be. So that'd be an example of like maybe when you don't need to use iNaturalist.
Yeah, and
even though it's always fun too.
If you do use iNaturalist and you only have your phone with you, a lot of times if you're trying to view flowers, you're carrying with you binoculars so that you can get a good view. And you can put your phone camera lens right up to the binocular in order to get close to that orchid species without actually, to get a better view through your phone, you can use your binoculars.
And someone asked, they saw a rattlesnake, which is cool, last weekend on the way to Driftwood Cove. And they asked, should have they reported to Parks Canada? I don't think they need to. I don't think I have, but it would have been a cool thing to put on iNaturalist just to show that you've seen one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's a fantastic thing to report. And again, that can be added right into our project. So if you join our project and then add it, we would really appreciate that. We do keep tabs on the rattlesnakes in our park.
Then can you take photos, load photos from the DSLR into iNaturalist? Yeah, and I think that'd be a situation where you'd want to do it from your browser where you can upload them onto your computer and then put them onto the website and use it from there. I think the only thing that may or may not happen is the date and time may not automatically update onto the observations. You might need to put that in manually, but other than that, everything else should work the same as it did the way that I showed you. And can anyone create a project? I'm not 100% sure about that, but I'm pretty sure anyone can create a project, yeah. Because people will create it for different areas, like how we did for the park, and then there's also ones for bio blitzes, like, okay, we're gonna see how many observations we can make in the weekend. So I'm pretty sure anyone can create a project. And I think we're out of questions for right now. So if there's anyone else who has anything, let us know. Give it another few seconds. Okay, so let me see. I'm just going to read this out loud and I'm going to think about it as I'm reading. So right now I have a Tabby Samsung. I take images with difficulty. The flap will fall off one of these days. Recommendations about factors when considering purchasing a gizmo so that I may do iNaturalist with ease. Best to go to Owen Sound to store or in person to try it. So is that like an issue with the tablet itself that is causing the issue?
I have used iNaturalist from a tablet. I've used it from a very old iPhone 7, which is my current phone. I've used it from a Samsung, any phone that can take a photo. And the only thing is that it is helpful to have data on your phone when using iNaturalist, just in order to click the suggestions button. So if you do want it to populate suggestions of what you might see, it uses the internet to do so. However, if you're comfortable just documenting it and then looking at the suggestions when you get home from your computer, you wouldn't need data. But data and a camera, any phone, any tablet will be able to use iNaturalist easily.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what the issue would be with that, Jan. It should like work on any sort of tablet or phone, Android, like because I have an Android and it's works fine on there. So unfortunately, I don't think I know exactly what the issue is or how to help you with it. But I think that looks like that might be all of the questions. So pretty sure I'll just pass it back to Alex to wrap us up for the end of the Orchid Festival.
Thanks, Zach.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you, everybody. All right, so thank you to Peter, Maddie, Sean, and Zach for your presentations this evening, for sharing your expertise, your enthusiasm, beautiful photos, and your videos with us. This concludes our presentations for the 2021 Orchid Festival. I'd like to thank Heather Keast and Jane Greenhouse for working with the Friends of the Bruce District Parks Association to bring this event together, and to thank Sean, Maddie, and Zach from Parks Canada for all their hard work. I'd also like to thank everyone here for spending these last few evenings with us. It's great to see so many people watching, and I know when we are next able to experience the natural beauty of the Saugeen Bruce Peninsula, we will all do so with new perspectives and greater insight. Stay safe and have a great evening.